All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. So before I dive into the presentation and demonstration, I want to cover just a few housekeeping details. So today's webinar is scheduled to last 30 minutes. That does include Q&A. Now, you're going to be muted during today's presentation, but the question I'm going to answer were those that were submitted when you registered for today's. And I think we have 3 that were submitted ahead of time. If for some reason we do have an outage during today's presentation, just wait for a minute and try to reconnect. You can also use that link you received via email to try and reconnect as well. Now, if at any time you'd like to speak with one of our supply chain experts, or if you have any additional questions, you can reach out to us actually a couple different ways. You can email us at supplychain@exostar.com, supply chain all one word. Or you can go to our website, www.exostar.com. There's a chat feature there on every page. We'd be more than happy to answer your questions via that channel as well. Now, if one of the questions you have is, will you be receiving the slides from today? The answer is yes. As a follow-up to today's presentation, you will get the slides, also a link to today's recording as well, if you'd like to share it with others, or if you just want to review something that you weren't quite sure of. So with that, let me dive into today's presentation. So thanks for joining me today for Simplified Supplier Lifecycle Management, a new era in supply chain management. Now, what we know is that supply chain management is difficult. One of the new predictors of success, especially in aerospace and defense, will be is how well can we actually manage that supply chain? How well can we collaborate with our supply chain? And how well will we know when there might be trouble ahead? And one of the things I'm going to particularly cover today is about those compliance risks. The, if you will, landscape of compliance in the Department of Defense and the supply chain folks is changing, right? We have some new regulations coming down the pipe. In particular, we have some current uneasiness with CMMC in the supply chain across the aerospace and defense sector. What we're going to talk today about is some compliance requirements around that and some ways to verify that your supply chain is compliant with those regulations and how to keep up to date with that. So to keep down on those disruptions, especially in the aerospace and defense industry, as I mentioned before, what we're going to talk about today is to ensure that those disruptions are at least manageable from the compliance standpoint, and that we have a heads up and we can manage by exception with those who might be becoming non-compliant. Do I have insight to their compliance? And again, this is particularly around cybersecurity risks and compliance with those requirements that you have because you flow down those requirements to your suppliers based on those contracts that you might have with the Department of Defense. Now, the problem that we often see is about how do I enable my buyers to work more closely with my suppliers? How do I allow them to collaborate easily and efficiently? Because at the end of the day, the quicker I can onboard my suppliers, the more I can empower my business users and my procurement professionals to do that. And how can I, allow them to answer my questions, get me the information I need so we can turn on, or if there is a problem, we can turn off those relationships quickly and easily. And we can do all of those things in a compliant manner. Now, as I mentioned, much of this is driven from the Department of Defense and the requirements that you have because many of us are either contractors to the Department of Defense, or we're a subcontractor to somebody that does have that contract. And because of that, they flow down requirements. Those flow downs come from Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations. Those are those DFARS clauses that flow down in my subcontracts to my supply chain. Now, in particular, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about those flow down requirements around cybersecurity. These fit around those requirements that, because as part of our contract, we may either create or pass down controlled unclassified information, we need to protect that information in a particular way. And those are in accordance with NIST 800-171. So that's that 252.204-720, right? Those mean that I need to do some things to assure organizations that I meet NIST 800-171. I have to perform a self-assessment. I have to ensure that self-assessment is reported to the Department of Defense into their supplier performance risk system. And coming down the pipe are those requirements around CMMC. That's the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. That if I do receive that controlled unclassified information, once every 3 years, I receive certification from a C3PAO, a certified third-party assessment organization, that I'm compliant with those controls, right? And then there are a number of others that you see listed here, which ensure that, again, because I've signed a contract with the Department of Defense, I flow down those same requirements to my subcontractors and other parts of my supply chain down to the nth degree. I need some way to verify that those organizations are compliant with these. And obviously, the easiest way to do that is to ask them and get that feedback, ensure that I keep it up to date, and ensure that if for some reason they fall out of compliance, I can quickly and easily deal with that. And that's what I'm going to show you today as part of the demonstration of Exostar's supplier management application, as well as some additional information that'll help you in that particular endeavor. Now, the Exostar difference, or the reason people come to Exostar is a network of organizations that have already been vetted to work together. Now, they haven't always been vetted all the way to CMMC compliance or a particular requirement, but we're going to show you today how you might want to gather those. But these have at least been vetted into the community in that these organizations aren't on a denied parties list, and the individuals who work in those organizations and who are collaborating together, they have been vetted as an individual that works with that organization, and they've been invited to work with others. They then can collaborate in a number of different ways. They can collaborate in and within supply chain applications where they're doing collaboration around the purchase orders, around the systems that might be supporting the development of actual products and things like that. They may just be collaborating around files, folders, Excel spreadsheets, etc. Or it may be just about gathering information from each other and exchanging that. But all of those are working in this community, and people come into this community because they've been invited and because it meets particular requirements, especially around the aerospace and defense industry. That Exostar Trusted Network has been in place for about 25 years now. As you see, it contains tens of thousands of suppliers and hundreds of thousands of individual users. These folks have been invited in by others. Many of you use Exostar today or use Exostar credentials to get into supply chain portals from the various prime contractors out there, the Boeings, Lockheed Martins, et cetera of the world, where you're picking up your purchase orders. You're finding out changes and adjustments to those. You're responding to those. You may also be invited to work in other applications. These may be PLM systems where you're co-developing products and things like that. You may have already been asked to fill out various forms and exchange those forms with the buying organizations that you're working with. And that's what we're going to talk about today is one of those applications. In particular, that application is called supplier management. This supplier management is part of the Exostar platform. That Exostar platform has a number of different modules that connect suppliers out there to the organizations they're working with. At a minimum, when you're invited into the network, we're going to vet the organization that they're not on a denied parties list. That's going to be a continuous check over time. As long as that organization is part of the network, it's going to be continually vetted against those lists to ensure we meet that base criteria. Then other organizations have asked you to work with them in different modules. Some of those modules are Exostar applications, and those are the ones you see here. These are sourcing applications, PO collaboration, supplier collaboration, which is, if you will, a Microsoft Teams application, or what I'm going to talk about today in particular, supplier management. In each of these, you're exchanging information, and in particular in supplier management, you're asked for information in particular about typically your cybersecurity compliance, your risk posture and things like that, and that'll help them determine whether or not they want to work with you or the depth of the working relationship, the type of applications you're going to get access to, etc. Many of you may also be using Exostar applications or Exostar credentials, I should say, to access additional applications that are actually hosted by those different suppliers out there, where you're doing, if you will, deeper collaboration, possibly at the product level. But Exostar is gating the entrance to that community, ensuring that you meet a base criteria and having the right credential to get into those applications. More importantly, you're only having to do that once to work with a whole lot of different contractors out there and partners out there, because that's really at the heart of what Exostar does. We're going to collect this information once. We're going to connect you once into the Exostar network, and then you're going to get access to all this information that's out there. We then can deepen those things and provide integrations into back-end ERP systems, into your own master data around your suppliers, and feed that information across to others that participate in the Exostar network, as long as you've given permission to share that information with others. So as I mentioned before, this is a layered system. We're first going to work at that organization level. An organization is going to be invited into the Exostar network by another organization. We're going to vet the organization, and then we're going to use a delegated administration model. What that means is, when you come into the Exostar network, you can invite others from your company into it. We're going to verify the identity of those individuals. We're going to provide them a credential. And then the other Exostar customers will determine what kind of proofing and credential you need to actually access the applications that they're going to gate. The information as it passes through and from the system is going to be encrypted, protected throughout. And we're going to provide that identity and access management solution to a number of different applications out there. As I mentioned, the application we're going to talk about today, or the module that we're going to be talking about from the Exostar platform, is our supply chain management module. Now, I'm going to dive into that to show you basically how this works. Now, this module is about vetting organizations at a deeper level. This isn't just checking whether or not they're not on a denied parties list. It's gathering additional information using some standard industry forms to collect that information. Again, we're going to collect that information once from organizations when they're invited by others. Once that information is shared, if another organization is also leveraging this module, they're going to be able to utilize that. They're going to be able to request that same information, but you as a supplier would only have to provide that information once. You can then choose to share that information with others as well. You could revalidate your information. If your information changes, it's going to notify all the suppliers that you provided that to that you've updated it. That way they can update their systems and their compliance requirements to ensure that you continue to access the information you need to ensure that your supply chain isn't disrupted. Let me dive into this and show you how it actually works. So I'm logged in as a buyer. So I'm a buyer that works for, let's say, Acme Company. I work with a number of different suppliers for Acme, and I need to ensure that they're compliant with our cybersecurity requirements to ensure that we can continue to work together. I can quickly look up one of my suppliers. Let me look up this company, Supplier Sim1. I'm going to check them against a standard industry form, the CCRA form. This is a cybersecurity, I'm sorry, I always get this one. This is a form developed by ND Isaac to ensure a cybersecurity baseline for organizations in the defense industrial base. This asks a series of questions and determines they're compliant with various regulations and DFARS requirements. It rolls that up into a score, whether or not you're compliant, what's applicable, but what's not. And then I can determine whether or not this organization is compliant, and then whether or not I'm going to give them access or subscribe them to different applications that they need to work with my organization. Now, to get here, what I did is I sent this form to these organizations that I want to work with. I did that again using Exostar Supplier Management Application. I can also continually monitor those different organizations, right? So I've got a list of all the companies that I'm working with. I've got their risk, low, medium, or high. I've got whether or not they're compliant at any given time. So, this organization is non-compliant. Their NIST form expires in 60 days. Now, there are 3 standard forms within the Exostar application. There's the CCRA form, mentioned that already. That's from the ND Isaac organization to gather information about a cybersecurity posture of particular organizations. There's a NIST 800-171 form, which is more explicit, particularly around CMMC requirements. This goes down each of the 110 controls, asks whether or not you're compliant with it, will create your SPRS score and send that to me as an organization you work with, because that may help also determine whether or not you meet my minimum requirements to work with you. We also have a conflict minerals form. We also have a basic intake form. And then we also have a form editor, which allows you to create any kind of information you'd like to gather from your supply base. Now, if for some reason somebody is non-compliant and something happens, right? This organization, they're still compliant for their particular applications, but their CCRA has expired. So what I can then do is I can take action and I can record that action here, either just to remind myself or to let others know as well. So I can go in and I can send them an email. I can note that. And then, the next time I go here, I'll see that, okay, we've emailed them to remind them to fill out their NIST 800-171 form. Now, the other thing to note here is the system is also automatically sending them these reminders as well. This isn't going to rely on a manual step that I take. That will also be triggered automatically within the application. Now, the way these forms or I gather the information from my suppliers, I could do it one at a time, but most organizations don't. We can do what we call campaigns. So I can create a new campaign. I can download a CSV template. I can fill out that Excel spreadsheet. I can then upload it here, and I can then trigger an action based on that. And those actions that I can trigger are typically, I'm going to send them questions, forms, whatever you want to call that thing. They're then going to log into supplier management on their side, and they're going to fill out that information that I need. Now, if they've already filled that information out for another organization, it's just going to show them what they answered before. They're going to vet that, make sure it's still valid, and then they're going to resubmit that form. When that list of users is sent out, or that list of organizations is sent out, I'm going to be able to determine, or the system will tell me whether or not this is a match to the organizations that I see that I've already made part of my organization. So for example, I sent out this campaign to 41 suppliers. Of these 41 suppliers, there are some number that I have to resolve whether or not this is actually the supplier that I meant. So I can click on here, right? This shows me that it's pretty confident that this is a new supplier. So I can check that. And then this is going to send an invitation to this new supplier to come work with us. But before you come work with us, fill out this information and provide it to us. It's going to go through an approval process. And when that approval process is done, they're going to get access to the applications to work with me. If I look at this organization, right, this isn't the only intense ink in the system, in the Exostar network. Now, it thinks that this is, right, a 96% confidence level that this one already exists. So I can agree with them. I can click that, and then that's not going to be a new organization. And then I'm going to do this for the 41 suppliers. 2 of these are new, and 39 need resolution. And those resolutions are because this matches others in the community. And you need to determine whether or not this one that you've provided me all this information is the right one because it matches an organization that's already there, or is this new? And then once they're, in, then they're going to have some kind of action. So when I look at those different campaigns, you're going to see those different suppliers are, they have an expedited subscription. That means once they filled out all the information, they're going to get access to the different applications. and it's going to show me their process throughout that, right? So they've been invited in, they're in process, their forms they pass through the pending approval process, they've been approved, and now they've been given subscription to the various applications that I need to work with them. So they've been given access to my supply chain portal or my procurement portal or something like that, and that's where we're now working together. Now, if they weren't compliant, I could, then turn off their access to those things. Again, using the Exostar credentialing system to say, hey, if once they reach this, if they're not compliant, then we're going to turn off that application to those. We can check at any time using the various forms and what they've done to determine kind of where they are in those different forms. Right. So this, they've been assigned a particular form. Where are they in that subscription? Oops, sorry, this one's taking longer than I thought. And so once an organization that I've sent information to gather, it's going to show me their progress. So I can, it's going to come with a date it was sent. It's going to come with an approval date, and then it's going to come and it's going to keep that up to date for me. So I always know kind of where in the process the different suppliers are that I've been invited into my organization. So hopefully what you saw today was a way for you to keep track of the compliance of your different suppliers as you want to work with them, using this community first approach, which allows the community to share their information not only with one organization, but with others across the organization as they choose to. This fits together with other Exostar supply chain solutions, both on the demand side, right? I'm a high volume supplier to a number of different organizations out there, and I want to better automate my process to enable me to keep up with demand from my customers. That's the Exostar demand line solution. Or, hey, I have enough suppliers out there where I now want to provide my own supply chain portal for those folks to better collaborate with me, so we're not relying on emails and spreadsheets and POs and things like that. We're relying on an electronic exchange of information where I'm providing them access to my supply chain portal, and my supply chain portal is then connected to my ERP system. So we did get a couple questions in. I'm going to answer these quickly because I know we're now out of time. So what if I have different information I want to collect from my suppliers? So as I mentioned, we've got 4 standard forms, but if you want to, there's a form editor as part of this application as well, which allows you to either clone a form and add additional information onto that form that you'd like to gather, or create a form from scratch to gather just the information you want to. For number 2, the system does have an approval workflow. So when you assign a form out, say it's a cybersecurity form, you as a buyer don't necessarily have the expertise into that. You can assign somebody from your compliance department to vet that first, make sure it meets all your requirements, and then they approve it. And that way that somebody from your organization in that role has approved that information. Now, if your suppliers aren't part of the Exostar network, that's okay too. This could join them to it. So if when you search for a supplier, they're not in the Exostar network, you can initiate that. You can invite them into the network, send those initial information that you want to gather from them. Once you've vetted kind of that first level, you can then invite them in and then gather the other information you may need to work on a particular program, project, etc. So it really meets all those different needs. So I want to thank everybody for your time and attention today. As I mentioned, if you do have particular questions, feel free to reach out to Exostar. Be more than happy to answer them either via email or, as I mentioned, just come to our website, chat with us. We can answer your questions that way as well. Thanks so much for joining me today, and have a great rest of the day.